It was supposed to be an ordinary October evening in Manhattan. A mother returned home, carrying her youngest daughter after a simple dance class. But what she found inside her apartment would change her life forever. Two of her beloved children were gone, and the person responsible was the one she trusted most. This is the story of Marina and Kevin Krim, a family living in New York's prestigious Upper West Side, and the shocking betrayal that destroyed their world. Marina and Kevin were the kind of parents people admired. Kevin was a digital executive at CNBC. Marina, a warm and creative mother, once worked as a teacher. Together, they built a loving home for their 3 children. Lucia, called Lulu, 6 years old, Leo, just 2 years old, and their youngest, little Nessie, who was only 3 at the time. They lived in the affluent Upper West Side, surrounded by art, culture, and community. To neighbors, they seemed like the perfect family, happy, stable, deeply connected. But behind this picture-perfect life, there was someone silently hiding her darkness. Like many busy families, the Krims had help with childcare. Their nanny, Jocelyn Ortega, was trusted with the most precious thing in Marina's life, her children.
Look at you,
At first, Ortega seemed quiet, dependable, even grateful. She had emigrated from the Dominican Republic and was recommended through relatives. For months, Marina treated her almost like family. She invited Ortega into their lives, their home, their daily routines. But Ortega had a shadow that few noticed. She was struggling with depression, financial pressure, and growing resentment. While Marina saw her as support, Ortega was quietly drowning in her own bitterness. October 25th, 2012, the day that changed everything.
For I know not what I do.
That afternoon, Marina took her youngest daughter, Nessie, to a swimming lesson. Lulu and Leo stayed home with Ortega. It was just a normal day. Marina laughed with her toddler, carrying her back up to the apartment. She expected to hear her other children playing, maybe the sound of toys on the floor, or Leo's tiny footsteps rushing to the door. But when she opened the door, silence. The apartment was too quiet. She called out for Lulu. She called out for Leo. No answer. Marina walked toward the bathroom. The lights were dim.
Leo? Hello?
The door creaked as she pushed it open. And there, in the bathtub, lay Lulu and Leo, her beautiful, innocent children, stabbed to death. In that same moment, she saw Ortega, the nanny she had trusted, standing over them. Her wrists were bleeding. She had tried to take her own life after killing the children. Marina's screams echoed through the building.
Oh, no.
Neighbors rushed out of their apartments. Kevin, who was traveling for work, would later describe the phone call he received as the single most devastating moment of his existence. Emergency services arrived quickly. Ortega was taken to the hospital under police guard. But for Marina, time stood still. In the span of just minutes, her world had collapsed. 2 of her 3 children were gone. Reporters later described the crime scene as one of the most haunting in New York's history. Even veteran detectives were shaken. One said, "This is the kind of case that never leaves you, the kind of case that makes you hug your own kids a little tighter when you get home." Kevin rushed back from the airport to face the unimaginable. He and Marina were forced to do what no parent should ever have to do: identify their children's bodies. Marina would later recall, "I remember every detail of that day. The way their skin felt, the color of the bathroom, the silence afterwards. It never leaves me." In just one evening, joy turned to horror. The family that once embodied warmth and love was now ripped apart by betrayal from the very person they had trusted most. But the question remained, why? Why would a nanny, a woman treated with kindness, commit such a brutal act? As investigators dug deeper into Ortega's life, a disturbing picture began to emerge.
It is okay,
one
sweetie.
filled with financial stress, resentment, and a darkness no one saw coming.
What happened here?
I don't know, it's terrifying.
To the world, she was a nanny. To the Krim family, she was a caregiver, a helping hand, almost like family. But behind that quiet face, Jocelyn Ortega carried secrets that no one saw. Secrets that would eventually lead to a nightmare. Jocelyn Ortega was 50 years old at the time of the murders. Born in the Dominican Republic, she had moved to New York in search of a better life. She became a naturalized U.S. citizen and, like many immigrant women, turned to childcare as a way to support herself and her family. At first glance, she seemed like a normal nanny. She lived with her teenage son and relatives. She worked part-time, making about $18 an hour. She had been with the Krims for 2 years, watching Lulu and Leo grow up. But underneath, her life was crumbling. Ortega was drowning in money problems. Bills piled up. Debts weighed heavily. She reportedly asked Marina Krim for more hours of work. Marina, always kind, suggested she could help by doing additional housework if she wanted extra pay. For Marina, this was a simple, practical suggestion. But for Ortega, it was a humiliation. In her mind, it wasn't an opportunity. It was an insult. Slowly, resentment began to root. She started to see the Krims not as generous employers, but as a wealthy family living a life she could never have. Friends and family later revealed that Ortega showed signs of depression and anxiety long before the tragedy. She became distant, withdrawn. Some relatives admitted she needed help, but they kept it quiet. Instead of getting medical treatment, Ortega hid her struggles. Even the Krims, who had supported her trips back to the Dominican Republic to see her family, had no idea how deep her problems really went. It was a dangerous silence, one that ended in violence. Police pieced together what happened in those final moments. Lucia, Lulu, just 6 years old, tried to fight back. She had defensive wounds on her arms. She was old enough to understand the horror of what was happening, and she tried desperately to protect herself and her little brother. Leo, only 2 years old, had been asleep when Ortega attacked. He never had a chance. Both children suffered multiple stab wounds from kitchen knives. Detectives later said Ortega showed no signs of panic, no evidence of a sudden breakdown. To them, it looked planned, cold, deliberate, and merciless. When Marina walked into that bathroom, Ortega was already on the floor.
For I know not what
She had slashed her wrists and then stabbed herself repeatedly in the neck.
Hail Mary,
Neighbors
full
and the
of grace,
building
the Lord is with
superintendent
thee.
witnessed the horrific scene. Paramedics rushed Ortega to the hospital. She survived her injuries, something many saw as a cruel twist of fate. The mother had lost her children. The nanny had taken everything, yet lived. In November 2012, just weeks after the murders, Ortega was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder. But her defense wasn't simple. Ortega's lawyers claimed she was mentally ill, that she couldn't be held fully responsible for her actions. They pushed for a psychiatric defense, hoping a jury would see her as a woman overcome by illness, not evil. The prosecution, however, told a very different story. Ortega was of sound mind. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she murdered those children out of anger, frustration, and resentment, not insanity. The Krims endured years of painful court appearances. Ortega made nearly 90 trips to court before her trial finally began. In 2012, Judge Gregory Caro even offered Ortega a deal, 30 years to life if she pleaded guilty,
For I know
but
not
Ortega
what I do.
refused. She wanted to fight. By February 2018, a jury was selected. In March, opening statements began in a Manhattan courtroom. The Krims sat just feet away from the woman who had destroyed their lives. Marina and Kevin listened as lawyers argued over Ortega's state of mind, reliving every horrifying detail. For the prosecutors, the case was clear. Ortega was angry at her financial situation. She resented the Crims. She took out her rage on the most vulnerable targets, Lulu and Leo. For the defense, it was about mental collapse, years of depression, crippling anxiety, a woman spiraling out of control. But the jury had to decide, was she insane or simply evil? As testimony unfolded, the truth became harder to ignore. Witness after witness, detail after detail, painted a picture of deliberate violence, not uncontrollable madness. And when the verdict finally came, the courtroom gasped. For 6 years, the Crim family waited. 6 years of court dates, hearings, and painful memories. And finally, in 2018, a Manhattan jury would decide the fate of the woman who destroyed their lives. On April 18th, 2018, the jury reached its decision. After weeks of testimony, after listening to both sides, they found Yoselin Ortega guilty of first-degree murder and second-degree murder. When the words were read aloud in court, Marina and Kevin Crim held each other tightly. For them, it was not relief, because nothing could bring Lulu and Leo back, but it was justice. The jury rejected the claim of insanity. They believed Ortega knew exactly what she was doing. On May 14th, 2018, Ortega stood before Judge Gregory Caro for sentencing. The courtroom was silent as Judge Caro delivered his ruling. His words were sharp, unforgettable.
You are pure evil. The only reason you are alive is because you didn't succeed in killing yourself. The blame lies with you and also with your family for not seeking help for your mental illness. You robbed these children of their lives, and you robbed this family of their joy.
The sentence? Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Ortega would never walk free again. Justice had been served, but peace would take a lifetime. For Marina and Kevin Crim, the story of Lulu and Leo would never end. It would only live on through love, not loss.